Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to ensure unhindered aid can get into Gaza. The legally binding order was issued after a request by South Africa, which brought the genocide case against Israel to the ICJ in January. The court noted in its latest order, quote, Palestinians in Gaza are no longer facing only a risk of famine, but famine is setting in, they said. The judges also cite UN data which finds, quote, at least 31 people, including 27 children, having already died of malnutrition and dehydration, unquote. Israel's required to submit a report to the ICJ in a month showing how it has implemented the order. In northern Gaza, where the UN warns famine is imminent, the Kamal Adwan Hospital is seeing an increasing number of extremely underweight babies and children. This is nurse Ahmed Al-Ali.
We received this case about an hour ago, a malnutrition case. We got used to receiving such cases daily. She is suffering as a result of a lack of nutrients she's receiving. You can tell that her age doesn't match her weight. She's 2 months old, and yet she's only 2 kilos and some fractions. My shift in the intensive care does not go without 3 or 4 cases of this kind, from bad to worse, and the result is death.
The official death toll in Gaza has now topped 32,600. In Syria, Israeli airstrikes near Aleppo killed some 40 people, according to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. State media report civilians are among the dead and injured. The attack struck missile depots used by Hezbollah and reportedly killed at least 5 Hezbollah fighters. Israel and Hezbollah have engaged in near-daily skirmishes across the Israel-Lebanon border since October 7th. Hebrew University in Jerusalem has reinstated Professor Nedra Shalhoub-Kevorkian, the internationally renowned feminist Palestinian professor who was suspended earlier this month after saying in an interview Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. Hebrew University reportedly did not demand she recount those remarks, but did reinstate her after she clarified her remarks on reports of sexual assaults during the October 7th attacks. Her suspension had been met with protests from students and faculty of the school. You can see our interview with Nedra Shalhoub-Kevorkian at democracynow.org. Here in New York, President Biden appeared with former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton in a massive campaign fundraiser at Radio City Music Hall Thursday night. The star-studded event featured musical performances, and the conversation with the 3 presidents was moderated by The Late Show host Stephen Colbert. Outside the venue, thousands of activists gathered to protest U.S. support for Israel's war on Gaza.
It's an issue of them funding and facilitating this genocide that's carried out by Israel. They are supporting the death of over 40,000 people, and this is not the first time they've supported death and war. And people are sick of that. People are going hungry in this city. People don't have a place to sleep. And all the while, we're sending billions of dollars to Israel to kill Palestinians and to steal their land.
Inside the event, the largest presidential campaign fundraiser in history, activists repeatedly disrupted Biden's conversation, shouting, "Stop arming Israel, let Gaza live, and shame on you." We'll hear more of those voices later in the broadcast. A new Gallup poll found that 55% of Americans disapprove of Israel's military actions in Gaza, up 10 percentage points from November. Earlier in the day, activists held a vigil on the steps of New York City Hall. Organized by the Slow Factory, activists read out names of Palestinians killed since October 7th. This is Vivian Sansour from the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library.
The soil has become so toxic because of the amount of bombs, from white phosphorus to all kinds of other ammunition, and the infrastructure was destroyed, so there's also sewage, there's so many diseases. So a lot of our trees, which for us, our trees are part of our family, they are part of our kin, and they are being destroyed too.
In voting news, a federal court ruled South Carolina can use a Republican gerrymandered congressional map for the upcoming U.S. House election. This despite the same court ruling last year it was unconstitutional and that it exiled more than 30,000 black residents from the Charleston area district. The U.S. Supreme Court has yet to issue a decision on the ruling's challenge, allowing it to stay in place at least through the 2024 elections. The seat is currently held by the Trump-endorsed Congressmember Nancy Mace, who's running for re-election. Meanwhile, in Florida, a federal court allowed a gerrymandered map that sidelines black voters to remain in place. The map was created in 2022 after Republican Governor Ron DeSantis set out to dismantle the Northern District of former Congressmember Al Lawson, a black Democrat. In other voting news, a Texas Court of Appeals has reversed the conviction of Crystal Mason, a black woman who faced 5 years in prison for submitting a provisional ballot in 2016, even though she was barred from voting due to a past felony conviction. Mason was unaware she was not eligible to vote, and the provisional ballot was never counted as a vote. Crystal Mason celebrated the win Thursday, saying, quote, "I was thrown into this fight for voting rights and will keep swinging to ensure no one else has to face what I've endured for over 6 years, a political ploy where minority voting rights are under attack," she said. To see our interview with Crystal Mason, go to democracynow.org. The Biden administration's restored a series of wildlife protections under the Endangered Species Act that were rolled back under President Trump. This includes reinstating certain protections for species classified as threatened with extinction and taking into greater consideration the threat of climate change when issuing protections. Sam Bankman-Fried, the disgraced founder of the now-defunct cryptocurrency exchange FTX, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. District Judge Lewis Kaplan noted Bankman-Fried's, quote, "apparent lack of any remorse," unquote, for defrauding FTX customers out of at least $8 billion. Bankman-Fried's lawyer said they plan to appeal. A federal judge has tossed Elon Musk's lawsuit against the Watchdog Center for Countering Digital Hate, writing in his ruling, quote, "This case is about punishing the defendants for their speech." Elon Musk sued the nonprofit after they reported that hate speech, racism, and misinformation soared on the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, after the billionaire took ownership of the site in 2022. The Center for Countering Digital Hate welcomed the lawsuit's dismissal, writing on X, quote, "We'll continue exposing hate and lies on X and campaigning for social media bosses like Musk to be held accountable." To see our interview about this case with the head of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, go to democracynow.org. Colombia has expelled its Argentine diplomats as tensions between the Argentine President Javier Milei and his leftist Latin American counterparts reached new heights this week. Excerpts from a new CNN interview with Milei show the right-wing leader lashing out at Colombian President Gustavo Petro and Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and attacking Venezuela and Cuba.
The
butchery in Venezuela is unheard of. Same with the jail, that is Cuba. There are other cases that are on their way to becoming like Venezuela, such as Colombia with Mr. Petro. We cannot expect much from someone who was a murderer, terrorist, and communist.
President Milei was referencing Colombian President Petro's history as a former member of the M19 rebel movement. Milei also called López Obrador ignorant. Among other things, the leaders are at odds over their support for Israel's assault on Gaza. Milei is a staunch supporter of Israel, while Petro earlier this week threatened to sever diplomatic ties with Israel if it ignores the UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. And Saudi Arabia was chosen to chair the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Rights groups expressed outrage at the news. Amnesty International's Deputy Director of Advocacy, Shireen Tadros, said, quote, Saudi Arabia's abysmal record when it comes to protecting and promoting the rights of women puts a spotlight on the vast gulf between the lived reality for women and girls in Saudi Arabia and the aspirations of the Commission, unquote. Earlier this week, Amnesty International released a report condemning a leaked draft of Saudi Arabia's first written penal code, which Amnesty says criminalizes free speech, homosexuality, and abortion, and fails to protect women and girls from all forms of gender-based violence. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.